Welcome to Back to the Paradigm Project. We are here today with Maren Christensen, who happens to be a previous mentor here at Paradigm. We are super duper excited to have her on. We're going to be talking a little bit about mental models and kind of perspective within perspective.
Wow, that's super meta.
Oh yeah. So to start off, we want to get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So a little bit about me. I taught at Paradigm for 9 years, 10 years, somewhere in there. And that's where I had done classical education and a lot of discussion in college and actually all through high school too. And really just came to look at how we think. Like, that fascinates me. And being able to be in a discussion and be with people and looking at how they're analyzing the information and how they're thinking about what they're taking in,
Right.
is fascinating. And especially if you can take that skill into your daily conversations and into your discussions and into all parts of life, it opens up avenues of communication that we don't normally think about. And that really started to become apparent for me when I was at Paradigm. So now I'm working at John Adams Academy as a mentor teacher, and that skill is becoming crucial in being able to look at not just what's being said, but the beliefs underneath. So I don't know if that answers your question, or what do you want to know, Kelln? You said about yourself, but
Yeah. No, that was awesome. That was awesome. That kind of gives us a background of where you were here at Paradigm, and a little bit of where you are now. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you did at Paradigm, some of the classes that you taught, some of the people you interacted with.
So while I was at Paradigm, I taught, all of the grades. I did 7 through 12.
Wow.
Yeah, at some point or another. But mainly I focused in the humanities. So seminar would be the main class. But also while being there, I taught a science class, philosophy and political science, like just a variety of other classes. And most of them, all of them had this discussion element involved.
Mm-hmm.
And so bringing that into every class really brought out this idea of mental models. And as I'm sitting there as a mentor watching a discussion going on, there's times where you stop and you're like, hold up, what's the next question I need to ask to keep this going, to help it be a positive experience? Like,
Right.
there's these parts of a discussion you're like, whoa, hold on, how do I do this as a leader? And being able to start recognizing what's the real question that needs to be asked, not just the follow-up, but what's the real question? And starting to look at those, how people express themselves, and then asking a question based on that really became foundational for me as a mentor, especially in seminars. So as I started doing senior seminar, where we're looking at more complex ideas. So for example, with 7th grade boys, when we were doing the 7th grade, it was, okay, what does it mean to be a hero? We talk about these really 7th grade questions.
Right.
But then as you get older, you're more willing to go to a deeper level. And that's when looking at the mental model that's when it became crucial to recognizing that, because sometimes the question like that you think, we need to ask a good follow-up here. Maybe that's not actually the question we need to ask. And so teaching seniors, juniors and seniors really challenged my ability to speak to that and to ask those questions,
Right.
to move the discussion to a meaningful place.
That's interesting.
So
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
especially as your role as a mentor, I mean, you're there to help them learn and to help them grow. So it's so interesting to have to find that balance where instead of you're the one learning and growing, you're the one guiding them and helping them to that place. And you have to see a couple steps ahead.
Yeah, I was writing a piece about discussion this week. And if you are leading a discussion, I know you guys lead discussions, as scholars too. But there's 2 parts that you kind of have to be aware of. You have to be aware of the content and the discussion itself. Like, you have to be in the discussion. But then as a discussion facilitator, you also have to be doing this other piece simultaneously. You can't separate them completely as the discussion leader,
Right.
of recognizing what's the environment of the room? How are people responding? Are they engaged? Are they uncomfortable? Do they feel like, just kind of being aware of all of those pieces at one time, simultaneously also being part of the discussion and not 100% disengaging. Like, you can't do one or the other. You have to have both, because a discussion it's only good if we're involved ourselves with our souls. Otherwise,
Right.
it doesn't matter. It's all on the surface.
Yeah, and that's so hard to do. Just even think about like leading a discussion where you're going into like new ideas and like new things, and then nobody actually knows what to say, so everybody's just kind of sitting there in silence, and you're like, we're supposed to be having a discussion, but like everybody's thinking, and you don't know what to do because you just aren't sure what's happening.
Right.
Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, no, because it's hard.
Yeah.
You have to gauge the people who aren't necessarily paying attention versus the people who are just waiting and sitting and thinking on a question, and then try and involve them and look at that kind of big picture to guide this discussion. And it's also interesting to see how that kind of differs in, you know, like book discussions where this is for a grade, you got to discuss the book, versus one that can be more freeform and where you can discuss more things, and the contrast of gauging those is so different.
Yeah, it really is. In using the mental models, it comes into play on both pieces, but it kind of almost adds a third layer. Like those two pieces, it almost adds like a third piece, but it has to kind of adds another aspect
Right.
to that whole experience.
Right. So, did you come up with these mental models? Where did that like mental models come from? Like, what is the background behind this? Because we keep talking about it, but
Yeah.
like, what? Like,
Yeah.
where is it from?
So it actually, there's a lot, if you look it up, there's tons and tons, like there's research all over this stuff.
Right.
It's something that for me, I feel like I've recognized. And then once I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, I get it.
Right. Yeah.
I know that. I felt really validated.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
But I actually heard about it first from Mr. Simmons. He
Interesting.
started talking about it. And he shared an article from the Corwin Institute talking about mental models, and it kind of lays out a conversation and then identifying the models within that conversation.
Yeah.
But you can look at another one I really liked is Farnham Street is a blog, and they kind of put stuff out like this, but they talk about mental models and how it's present all over the world.
Right.
Well, because it's an aspect of our humanity, how we think. There's tons. If you Google mental models, there's tons and tons. But part of it also, there's a big movement right now. I don't know if I should say big, but there's a movement right now in education to talk about mental models in order to connect with scholars.
Yeah.
And so that's something that is actually becoming more and more apparent, is being able to connect with people, scholars, coworkers, principals, administrators, like through identifying models. Another one that's similarly connected is The Belief Window by Hiram Smith, and he talks about that process going from our beliefs to the outcome.
Yeah.
So it's kind of everywhere, but it's something for me that I've really come to utilize in conversations all the time.
Yeah.
So could you define a little bit more what mental models are for our listeners?
So there's quite a few definitions, and there's actually some conversation about mental models and how they're defined. A very general definition would be they're how we understand the world. They're the underlying beliefs behind everything we do and say.
Okay.
That's what I think of them as, but they're not always conscious. So
Right.
I don't say something like classics are the best and consciously go, oh, I've got a mental model about that.
Yeah.
It's more of
Right.
there's this something, an experience that I had or something, this interaction I had with a classic that influenced my belief
Right.
about classics.
Right.
So you and I could be having a conversation, maybe even about, Star Wars.
Mhm.
And we're talking about how, you say Darth Vader is a horrible villain, right? I'm like, no, he's just misunderstood. And he really had a hard time, and
It's
he
just a
lost his love
phase.
and didn't know he had, right? It's just a phase, which tells you underneath, you and I are coming from two different places. He's a villain, he's horrible. Therefore, underneath might be villains exist and they're horrible people. And for me, underneath, there's a different belief.
Right. Right.
And that's part of what makes discussion so fun, is that we're coming from these different places. And so if we're learning to ask the effective questions, then we come to understand truth, and we go on that journey together.
Right. And that's like what Smith is saying with the windows.
Yeah.
He's like, you see everything through this window, and like everything goes through the window, and there's like the window is basically everything you've experienced and like all of your beliefs and whatever. And then it finally hits you. And then you understand that by what you saw through what you've experienced.
Right, right.
That's right. With the mental models, some organizations like to kind of define it's how we shape our mental models shape the connections that we have, how we literally see the world. So the opportunities that open to us.
Right.
They kind of help us simplify more of those complex ideas and how we find things relevant or not. But it's all it's under the surface.
Right.
Right.
And so the more we can come to identify consciously, oh, that's how I view things, we can either change it or we can modify or we can keep it.
Right.
Right.
And become more effective in our communication. So
one thing fascinating that I have heard him say is he talked about how, yes, this all kind of like your experiences, they put these ideas and principles on your window, and then that's the way that you see the world. But it was very interesting to me that he said that not only do these principles shape how you act and what you do and what you're thinking consciously, but if you try to change your beliefs and ideas only on a conscious level without changing something about this belief window, then your actions won't change. It's just a surface thing if you're doing it there. But if you really want to have true growth and true change, then you have to be changing the principles on your window and changing those ideas and those mental models that are under the surface.
right. There's actually, so when we talked about this in classes, because I've used the belief window before I started looking at mental models, I was introduced to the belief window by Mr. Christensen. While we were dating, actually. It was cute.
Aww. Goals.
No. But I've always like been fascinated by that idea. And so the way I think about it is like he talks about your needs are first, like your basic human needs, right? Survival, food, water, shelter, human needs. Then you have your belief window, and then you have your rules, behaviors, and results. Needs, you also have like to love and be loved.
Right.
To the variety, like think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? And like the bottom
Right.
one or two. The way I describe it to, I remember we did this with the 7th grade boys was, so for example, I have a need to survive, right?
Right.
And I remember when I was little, I got stung by a bee. And this bee stung me right here, right?
She's
on my
pointing
ring
at her
finger.
ring finger.
Yeah. Stung me right here on my ring finger, and it was above, I was wearing a ring. And so my finger started to swell. And as a kid, that's terrifying.
Yeah.
Like it's just like getting
Right.
bigger and bigger and bigger. And we couldn't get the ring off. So I'm thinking, oh no, I'm going to die.
Right.
We're going to have to cut my finger off. Oh my gosh. Well, finally, we didn't cut the finger off. It's still there. But we did have to cut the ring off because my finger was so swollen.
Right.
We couldn't get it off. And so finally, and then it starts to, all the swelling went into my hand, and I had like a baseball glove of a hand for a week.
Ooh.
Well, then what happened after that experience is I created this belief that bees are scary.
Right.
Bees are going to kill me, and I hate bees.
Yeah.
I guess that's 3 beliefs. And so then my rules became don't go around bees. Like that was a rule. Like,
Yeah.
so then my behavior was run away from bees. Well, then my results, I mean, I hadn't gotten stung, right?
Right.
But I was constantly like, when we were outside, I was
Worried
like, oh my
about
gosh,
the bee. Yeah.
Right.
you're worried about the bees when you're outside. It's their house, not mine. So that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got stung again, and it wasn't as bad as I remember it being. It was more of like, oh, I just got stung by a bee. Ow.
Yeah.
It's like, darn it.
Said, oh, heck.
Dang it.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Right?
All the Utah swear words.
All the swear words. All the words.
Heck.
Said, shut the
But it
front
wasn't-
door.
It wasn't as traumatizing. And so that experience showed me, hey, Maren, your belief is wrong.
Right.
Your window's wrong. And then realizing, okay, my needs, like it wasn't satisfying my needs to run away from the bees all the time.
Wait.
That I was missing out on.
Yeah, that's actually how I felt about swimming. Because once upon a time, I
Yeah?
almost drowned. And so I was like terrified of water. And then
Oh.
someone like pushed me into like a 12-foot pool. And like after I got over the initial fact that like I had been pushed into a 12-foot pool, I like swam just fine. I was like, it's actually not that bad.
I love that.
See?
There you go. There you go.
So there's that moment when our beliefs and our behaviors conflict with reality.
Yeah.
And we have to stop and say, okay, wait, why is that? And for you, you were fine swimming. And for me, I was fine with bees. But looking back at that experience, I had to stop and really take a minute it's a silly example. And hopefully we'd be doing practice with something more introspective
Right.
and more meaningful than bees. But look back at my belief and say, how is that serving me?
Right.
Or is it opening or closing doors for me? And same thing, like with this mental model piece of, are my models helping me move forward? Or are they keeping me from my progress?
Right. And that's
What are they
something,
doing?
like, just thinking of other examples in my life. From like fourth to like sixth grade, I was like, okay, I hate classical music. It is so boring. That's what people listen to go to sleep. And then another thought I have was like, I hate like classic books. Like, why am I forced to read these books? These are the worst things in the entire world. And like that kind of carried into seventh and eighth grade in Paradigm. I like hated it so bad. But once I
Hurt my soul.
yeah, I know. And I mean, I played music from like fourth grade. Like that's when I started. And I just hated classical music. And then like I got here to Paradigm and I hated the classical books too. But when I got here to Paradigm, I was like forced to do it even more. And I was like, I hate this so much. And then I actually like started seeing things and I started having that change in my window where classical music isn't boring. It's actually way cooler than the modern songs that we actually listen to now. And then playing it, there's so much emotion and things that you can put into it. And like classics, there are so many things I can get out of it and life-changing experiences that you can get just from reading a book and then talking about it. And I hated that, but now it's like something I strive to do. And I help run a whole podcast that talks about the classics now.
That's awesome.
Right.
That's cool.
Oh, that's so cool. Okay. So here's the question that I have is that like we've talked a little bit about how, we have these mental models and we have these underlying beliefs, and that if we can kind of change them or get out of that, then that can sometimes fix some of our actions and some of our experiences. But how do we actually change them? Because you can't always just say, oh, I'm just going to not believe this thing anymore. That's how you get not changing things, right? What are the things that we can do? And I know there's a couple different people who have different ideas, but what are some of those, and what do you think? How do you change those ideas?
Sometimes I've noticed it's purely awareness, right? It's awareness that my beliefs and my models, the things that I'm doing, and I know I'm using those terms interchangeably. They're actually kind of not, but that's just we'll just bookmark that moment.
Okay.
So
Bookmarked.
Thank you. But sometimes it's awareness. So for example, I'll give you two examples. So growing up, I was kind of the loud one.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Like just a little crazy, really social, but loud. Like I was really loud in high school and I'm still loud. But I remember I had some friends over, and then after that experience, and we were just like doing things, like I was just having fun with my friends and blah, blah, blah,
Right.
whatever. And afterwards, my mom and my sister were like, Maren, you're really loud, like with your friends. Yeah. And they weren't being mean. They were just drawing attention to it and saying, you're really loud. And sometimes it feels like you're drawing attention to yourself and they were being very sensitive and kind. But I remember this conversation because I wasn't necessarily hurt by it. I was just like, oh, I didn't know that. Like, I didn't think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
So I was just doing my thing, right?
Yep.
But all it did was bring awareness, and that awareness and recognizing, oh, hey, maybe I'm too loud and that's impacting the people around me. So they just brought my awareness to that. And that was enough for me to tweak it. Like, I don't even consciously remember thinking, Maren, you need to be more quiet. All it was, okay, thanks, mom and sister, noted.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then that behavior shifted on its own. It just kind of happened because I recognized what was going on, but it wasn't like this huge conscious, oh my gosh, I need to be quiet.
Right.
Just like, oh, okay.
Right.
And then, and I'm not saying that happens all the time, but sometimes just awareness. Whereas I had an experience, it was actually at Paradigm. I think back on these conversations a lot. So in talking with someone like Simmons or Mr. Fife or Ms. Cox or Ms. Arneson or Mr. Crowley, like all of the beautiful people that are at Paradigm, you have these moments where you realize, whoa, I'd never thought about it that way. Or, whoa, they are an amazing person.
Yeah.
I want to be like that.
Right.
And then just that awareness helps you shift your behavior.
Right.
And very naturally, very organically.
Yeah.
But because you're aware, right? One more was, I was having these conversations. There was a mentor at Paradigm who was having a hard time. This is years ago. Like, I don't even know if you guys were around or not, but was having a hard time. And part of it had to deal with how Paradigm does things very differently than a public school.
Right, definitely.
And so there's a lot of questions that come up. And how do I have a discussion? How do I, what? How do I mentor versus teach? And some of these really hard ideas to put your mind around, to wrap your mind around, they were having a really hard time. And so we had a lot of conversations, but the conversations weren't about, oh, let's try this classroom management strategy. Like, it wasn't that. We did that, but it was more of, how do you feel about your scholars? How well do you know them? And how are you seeking to know them? How do you want to inspire them? What are you currently doing that inspires? So they were different questions than behavior based. They were all internally based.
Right. And so, like, instead of asking questions like why aren't your scholars discussing, or like why, like, instead of basing it on the classroom, you base it on the person. And I mean, that can be very intimidating, or even like, not intimidating, but you can take like offense to that. And that could be, I mean,
totally.
De Bono has a whole story on that. But
she knows, she lived it.
Yeah. But like, it's interesting how, like, sometimes you do have to call people out. And it's not because you're trying to be rude. And if you are doing it to be rude, then it's not trying to like bring out these models and like actually help them be a better person. It's like you have to do it from a place of love and from, I don't know, it's like anatomy of peace.
Yeah.
Like if you want somebody to change, you can't be like, change. You have to like get them to realize that they need to change, and then like just love them through the whole process.
Yeah. Well, and the other part to it as well is that you can't expect them to change how you want them to change.
Right.
So if you're coming at it from kind of these other types of questions that bring out those beliefs, then as someone who is seeking to bring out those beliefs, I can't then say, well, now you need to change that, or you need to do it this way.
Yeah.
All I can do is say, what do you believe? Actually, no, that's not even the question. It'd be some of the questions that I remember asking is, how do you feel about your scholars in this particular class? And then they would have to say, they're so awesome, but I feel like I'm failing all the time. Okay, why do you feel like you're failing all the time? And then we'd start talking more about that. And so it actually wasn't about the scholars. It was about the feelings over here.
Yeah.
Right.
And it was his own stuff. So being able to, hold on, back up. You just said something, Daniel, that brought up this idea that I can't finish yet. What'd you just say? Repeat it.
Anatomy of peace.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Yeah.
So often in these conversations, what would happen is we'd have this big conversation that really wasn't, I mean, it was about having a hard time in class or dealing with a scholar that might be rebellious. I don't know, rebellious paradigm. So, but maybe someone that was struggling, and then talking more about the beliefs, and then letting that person go and approach it how they think is best.
Right.
Because once those beliefs are identified, then we can change how we act from a very organic space. And there are times where it's like, here's some ideas to try, right? But in the end, they went out and chose how they wanted to change their behavior.
Right.
We can't dictate that.
Right.
Yeah.
That's what infringes on their agency to be who they are and to be the best that they are. Is all we can do is ask questions to help bring out the best, and then they go and manifest the best in what they do.
Oh my gosh.
Is that why? Okay. I'm like having epiphanies of anatomy of peace that like I've never thought of before, and I kind of feel dumb right now. Is that why?
Hey, that's not a healthy mental model.
Whatever. Anyway, so is that why, like at the beginning, they like take the troubled kids away, right? To their whatever. And then the whole book is based off of the parents.
Oh!
Right? Trying to change the parents, try to get them into this idea.
Yeah.
Because they're also the ones having these problems. And so the whole book is calling the parents out so then the parents can go and actually change themselves so that they can actually have a healthy relationship with their kids.
Oh my gosh.
That makes sense. And
That
I don't know
does.
why that's occurring to me now when I read the book last year, but okay.
I mean, that does though, because, and especially these days, a lot of the times we're forced into these environments that are trying to fix us.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, you need to be perfect, or you have all these problems, you could be better, you know, doing all these things. Or we have certain expectations that we're not getting met, or when people do try and help us, they're like, oh my gosh, you need to do this better, and you need to do this better, this is what you need to do. And instead of that, we need to be, as that facilitator, helping somebody get out of an unhealthy mental model. You need to be helping them process it themselves rather than you processing it and forcing that on them, because otherwise it's just going to like have a loading dock of a ton of unprocessed emotions for them. I also think it was interesting, Maren, that you were saying earlier that you're asking them what they feel about something. It's the emotions, not just like an event that happened. And psychologically, that is how a lot of people process things, is they don't process the literal events. They don't necessarily process the literal words that were said. They process how it made them feel. And so then my brain says we can take that into our day. We can keep in account anatomy of peace and say, well, for helping the people around me, I need to help them process and help them validate their feelings. And then for myself, I can do that with my own conscious and say, it's okay to feel like I'm failing at ABC. But I also need to understand that that is not necessarily reality, and that is not necessarily the mindset I want to be in right now.
Exactly. And that's something that let's see, being able to acknowledge that feeling, like we talked a lot at Paradigm, we talk a lot about environment, right?
Right.
That we want to have an awesome environment and the culture, and guys, it's amazing. Like that's part of what makes Paradigm so incredible.
Amen.
Right.
Hallelujah.
Is the culture. It's so good, you guys. Like, oh my gosh. Anyway,
Yes, it is. It
so
like
good.
is.
Yeah. Like
oh my goodness. It just
actually
is. Yeah.
Like,
oh my goodness.
It really is. And I confess, like week 2, I've cried. I've actually cried a lot.
Same.
Since coming here.
Me
Not
too.
because it's bad.
But about
because
other
great
things.
people.
Right.
But about other things. But part of it, like in being like, just I miss Paradigm so much.
Right.
And I know that's a side note. You can edit that out too. But we talk so much about that because I think part of it is we remember our experiences and we remember how we feel and we know what we believe first. And then we remember content.
Right.
Then we remember facts. Then we remember history. We remember science. We remember. But if we don't have that underlying foundational piece in place, are you going to remember the history class of the teacher who you felt like hated you? You're going to remember that they hated you, which is probably a flawed belief, right? But you remember that. You're not going to remember the history.
Right.
And so to have that inspiration and to have that powerful experience in a discussion, you have to have that environment, that culture. I know it's kind of a side note for the mental models, but it's almost like the culture of Paradigm is the mental model or the belief that then allows all of the behaviors and all of the discussions and the reading and the classics and all those things to happen.
Right.
And so there's that. One thing, well, never mind. Okay, I'll just put a period on that.
It's wonderful. That's quite fascinating. I've been filling out Sterling Scholar application type things. And I've been finding a couple of my personal mental models that I have gained from Paradigm. And it's entirely what you said, that the culture, the environment, it is such a safe place to learn and grow and to fail and to learn from said failure.
Yeah.
And I realized I was writing on it, and I realized just how much of a difference it has made in my life to go to this school, because it's given me so many ideas and so many places to go and so many opportunities that not only just, it's a great science class or, hey, I like art type of a thing. It's that I've learned how to love education. I've learned how to love people. I've learned how to interact with society in a way that I feel is healthy. I've learned how to discuss and to dredge text, all of these crazy things. And I've created these mental models about them where a lot of the time, at other schools per se, I have a lot of friends who are going to public schools and they're like, oh my gosh, I hate learning and I hate education and I hate school and I hate reading and I hate writing. And they create all these negative mental models that aren't necessarily going to help them through life and aren't necessarily pleasant to experience either, right?
Yeah.
And then I look at the contrast at Paradigm where I know that myself and my peers all say, I love reading, I love discussing, I love writing, I love being able to do all these different things and interact with the mentors and have this connection because it makes me feel good, And then that sets in those beliefs, those underlying beliefs that create that beautiful learning and inspiration and enlightenment.
Okay, so there's this article here written by John Edwards and Bill Martin, and they explain a process to find these mental models in somebody so that they can go through that whole experience that we were just talking about. Could you explain to us what that process is?
So there's, according to their approach, they have a practice where they will take 3 people, and one is the facilitator, the other one is the one asking or being asked the questions, and the third one is the note taker. And what they do is they start out with a question, and the facilitator, their role is to only ask questions. That's all they can do. And they can ask follow-up questions, but they don't summarize. They don't, they don't repeat back. They're, I guess maybe a little bit, but their role is purely to bring out or to draw out that conversation. And then you have the one who is being asked the questions and they just answer the questions. And it feels a little awkward at first. I've done this a few times with people. It feels a little awkward at first because someone is tracking what you're saying.
Right.
But it's really cool. So then they're just answering the questions. So there's just a conversation going on. That's all that's happening. And then that third person, the note taker, what they are doing is going through and they're just listening.
Right.
And as you're listening, and I'm imposing a personal opinion within this article about listening without judgment.
Right.
So you kind of have to just sit and let it happen.
That's so hard sometimes.
It's so hard.
Because you're you did what? And you're feeling that way? Why?
Right? Exactly. But we've been talking about more of an in-depth, cut straight to the chase of, feelings and we're not practicing psychology here, guys. We're not being counselors.
Right.
You got to watch that line. But it's really helpful to be able to do this in a discussion.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure there's the disclaimer. We're not being counselors and psychologists. We're just talking about how people think.
Right.
But this article, I really appreciate how they talk about it because it's very much a conversation, a normal conversation. They start with a very innocuous question, such as, what area for improvement do you want to target? That's a pretty basic question.
Right.
Anybody could ask you, hey, what's a goal that you have? How do you want to be better?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
I have a list that goes through my head.
Yeah.
So they just start out with one. And the person says, my time management. And then the questioner starts to ask questions about.
And it keeps going down.
Right.
And it keeps going down. And the person, narrower and narrower, and they kind of maybe do a follow-up. There's a couple times where the questioner would ask specifically, do you believe that? Or what do you believe?
Right.
But they're drawing out a contrast,
Right.
a tidy desk means a tidy mind. Therefore, and then the questioner says, well, what do you think?
Right.
Which then kind of gets more narrow, like you said, it's getting deeper and deeper. And then at the end of this practice, you have the note taker who has just gone through and all they have done is identified the beliefs that underlie the statements. And the more you practice it, the more you'll be able to identify.
Right.
So for example, when he says, I want to be better with my time management. Well, what's the belief underneath that?
That he's bad at time management.
Yeah, I believe my time management, as the article says, I believe my time management is poor.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next question, well, why is that? Well, I should, have a tidy desk, tidy mind. Well, I think the way they say it is, this one identifies it as, I assume that people see my untidy desk and think that means I have an untidy mind.
Right.
Well, then to me, the article then keeps going on. I believe I'm not on top of things. I value time and space to think on kind of that route. But to me, on that part where he talks about that people see my untidy desk and think that means I have an untidy mind, my next question is, why does that concern you?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Or something along those lines, because underneath that statement is another belief.
Yeah.
Right.
That's about people
watching.
and that there's actually
that they
right?
care.
Right.
That they care that he has an untidy desk. That's what's fascinating to me about this is this article follows, the focus on time and space and the beliefs about time and space, which is fine because that's what they narrowed in on. But amongst that, they only identify 6 mental models at the end of this article. There's more.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those are underneath the models that they actually put in. And so you can go all sorts of different places. And that's what's beautiful about this is that as human beings, we are multifaceted. We're not just these one purpose beings who solely want to work on time management or who want to be a mechanic when we grow up. There's so much more to us. And if we can learn to recognize those moments, when to ask questions and what kinds of questions to ask to bring out those models, that's when we really get to know someone. And that's when we make those connections.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when we can actually help someone identify maybe more of who they want to be and what they want to do and who they are. And so having done this, there's times where in that conversation, we finished it. And after having someone read those beliefs back, they said, whoa, I didn't even realize that I thought that.
Right.
Right.
But it wasn't until somebody reflected back to them what was said.
Right.
Yep. Okay. I really want to try this. Can we do that?
Can we do that?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay, so you'll be the questioner.
Yeah, I can
Maren,
be the...
You'll be asking Kelln the questions, and I'll take the notes. But this sounds so fun.
Yeah.
It is so fun. I haven't done it in a while, guys, so I'm really out of practice.
That's okay. And we can take it slow. Right, we can take it slow.
Yeah.
Just remember when you did it to me and shattered my worldview of myself.
But remember, I wasn't the one asking the questions. I took the notes.
I know.
Oh.
But you shattered his view.
Daniel, don't shatter me.
Kelln, you're about to be shattered.
She's fragile.
It depends. I think in this practice, and there's lots of different practices, right? And different ways to do this. But in this particular practice, the note taker is the one identifying the models.
Mm-hmm.
As a questioner, like you said, it's that meta thing.
Right.
You've got these pieces going on. And so there's a little bit of both. But my job isn't to really identify those. Mine is to help you talk.
Right.
That's my role.
To just ask questions.
Yeah.
I have to be the one
So
good job.
He's got you covered.
I can do this. Oh gosh. Don't break me.
You're going to be fine.
All right, let's do this. I'm so excited.
Oh, good. Okay. Let me find. Actually, we'll start with their same question because I think it's a pretty safe question, and one that.
Trigger warning.
What?
Trigger warning. Things could get real.
Bring it on.
Oh my goodness.
You're concerned about your own self-worth, listeners. Stop
Oh
that.
my goodness. We'll see how this
No,
goes.
it's totally fine. And there's times you can do this with a better question. This probably isn't my favorite one to start with, but I think it's a safe one.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay. So we'll just phrase it exactly how they do. So you can feel really experts do this, Kelln. No, what area for improvement do you want to target?
Oh my goodness. Said choosing one. One thing I think I've struggled with for a while is writing and reading and also just English in general. Words. Let's go with that.
You're the host of a podcast. I should be writing the yearbook.
See, this is why this is dangerous.
Oh, so good.
You're narrowing down to one.
Should I-
Writing and English.
And words.
Always good.
Writing, I don't know. That seems I'm supposed to be good at stuff.
No. See, okay. Stop, Maren. Stop. I have to stop myself.
It's not your job.
Because I got a brain. I need a note. Why do you believe writing is important?
I think writing is important because it's a way to communicate that's not just, verbal. Because verbal, you're going to lose somewhere. You're not going to remember the context or the words or anything, but it's a way to have written communication. And there's so much beauty in writing, and there's so much beauty in the things that you can come back to it.
Why does that matter to you? How is that connected to you?
Well, there's a couple beliefs that I've picked up throughout the years. And I think part of it is that I see a lot of beautiful literature in comparison to my own. And because of that comparison, then I judge myself, which is unhealthy. Then there's also, in my environment, I go to Paradigm, like everybody writes here. And so to have peers as well that are writing these beautiful things. And my brother also, who's an incredible author. I think it's that I'm in an environment, there's beautiful writing going on around me, and I'm not quite happy with my own. And I feel that it doesn't quite meet the level of where it should be. Whether or not that's a good thing, I think that's what I believe.
What dictates where it should be?
Oh, I would like it to be me. Is it? Probably not. Like, we grow up in a society that the world tells us we have all these standards, right? And I think that I've fallen into the trap of believing a whole lot of them, whether or not I like it. That's really interesting. I think that, like, I hold myself to a standard of my brother who's an author, my friends who are older than me and have had more writing experience to me, and to great literature that I read. I don't think that's fair for myself, since I haven't had the same experiences.
So what makes literature great?
The ideas. That's interesting. Ooh, it's the ideas, it's the concepts, and I mean, in that sense, the actual words don't actually matter. It's the content and the ideas and what you can get out of them. And I mean, the words do matter, because if it's not in a clear, concise, communicated way, then you're not getting the idea, right? The important part is that you have to start with a good idea and a good concept, and then turn that into good literature. Because you could have fancy words and have it be about your dog eating dog food and nobody would care, you know? But you could have simplistic words and straightforward words about this beautiful concept that then has so much deeper impact. Maybe I just want to make an impact. I don't know. And then I see people doing it through writing.
When you do this practice,
Okay.
They recommend
Right.
7 minutes. But
Okay.
this is also something that that Corwin Institute has used. They use it for, I'm not totally sure how they use it specifically, but they have a lot of stuff on helping school change and helping people identify their beliefs and the whole bit.
Mm-hmm.
So they recommend 7 minutes. In a normal conversation, there's no limit, right? But what is there is permission, unspoken or spoken. So this is before we come to your part, Daniel, too, because I want to hear what you heard.
Oh my gosh, you have so much written.
You guys, you all gave permission for this to happen, right? In a more formal setting. In a normal conversation, there's times where this doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Total side note. You know who's the expert at this on informal conversation is Simmons. I don't know if you guys ever anyway.
No.
Fife did it too.
I remember Fife doing it to me though.
Fife did it.
I was like writing a paper or something, and he was like, "Do you actually believe what you're writing?" And then like all these other things, and like I was like, "Fife, stop attacking me like this. I cannot. I'm in 7th grade, Fife."
Exactly.
Oh,
But that's what I'm like. There's permission. Otherwise, it does come off as "stop attacking me." It's not that, right?
Right.
Fife just naturally is amazing at doing this anyway. So
Yeah.
Right.
but that's something that just to kind of be aware of, there's permission, whether it's spoken or unspoken. There's times where if you start to do this and people, they can get uncomfortable and you can see it in their body language. But if it's sincere, most of the time it's very natural. Anyway, okay, Daniel, about it.
Okay, Kelln.
Go for it, Daniel. I'm scared.
All right, this is what I wrote down.
Expose
I
me
don't
on
know
the
if it's
podcast.
100% exactly what I was supposed to be doing.
We'll talk about it.
That's okay.
But it might be. I have a few things. Okay, so at the beginning, I wrote that she believes that she's bad at writing. And she also believes that she has to be good at stuff.
Yeah.
Like if she isn't good at stuff, that's bad, apparently. Moving on, she wants communication. Like she believes that communication is a key thing, but also a beautiful thing that is in life, basically. She believes that compared to the people around her and other things that she's read and experienced, she's not good enough, and she compares herself to that. She drags herself down because of the people she's around, and, well, she drags herself down because she believes she needs to be better. Just to sum that up. She doesn't think she's enough because of society's standards and not because of her own standards. And her standards are based on others and what, like, others believe she should be and not what she thinks she should be.
Making me emotional.
She also believes that literature, like the ideas of literature, are actually better than the words of literature. But she also believes that you have to have a good idea before you can start writing. She also thinks that you have to be perfectly planned out before you can start writing. And she believes that writing has to have an impact on other people. What she writes has to be impactful to something in some way. So
I feel very called out right now.
It is kind of a very vulnerable space, like, to be in. Reflecting back, there was only one in the, maybe two, that I would say hit more of an evaluative space. And this is the hard part for the note taker, to not interject themselves into it.
Right, yeah.
But other than that, I mean, it's an opinion, right? So blow it off if you want.
Right,
But
yeah.
I think you nailed a lot of them. Like, same from what I was hearing.
Thanks.
But
Right.
Kelln, what do you think? Because in the end, Daniel and I can say, here's what, what we heard, but
Here's
Right.
who Kelln is because of what we
heard.
wrote down.
what do you think?
Oh my goodness. I think it kind of hurts to hear. It's a little bit, it's an interesting experience because as he went back and reflected on what that was and how I said that, instead of saying it from my brain, I heard it outside of, and that was a very interesting perspective because I was like, yeah, yep,
Right.
and quite an odd experience, but it's, I want to put my words well, which is another, again, my brain saying that I have to have this perfect standard of English function, as I just don't anyways, but there's this kind of mental block. There's this mental model that I've created for myself that I don't think I really realized until, and I started realizing it at the beginning of this year when I started doing more writing, and I was like, it's not happening. It just ain't happening. So it's interesting to see that presented to me and validated. It's also interesting that because of the setup that this has, it has the unbiased person questioning who's not inserting their ideas and who's not like telling them what to do about it, just helping them kind of process this idea or emotion. And then there's the sideline person who's just documenting. They're not inserting their ideas. They're just documenting. So it's the person being interviewed and it's their ideas and thoughts and their underlying beliefs. And so to see that this is what's going on in my mind, whether or not I acknowledge that on a regular basis, is both fascinating and enlightening, I think. And I having now gone through this, actually, I think that I would recommend it for a lot of other people, and I want to do it more because it starts the movement for change. And now seeing that, I see that a lot of my ideas about myself and about my writing and about other things like that are not actually, and it's not that they're not where they need to be, because that's my brain again saying, hey, you're not enough, but I'm basing them outside of myself. And I know from other experiences that basing my ideas on outside of myself isn't going to help me, and they're not really, it's not as effective or gives me as much happiness. And so to kind of see where I'm at for this, it gives me a perspective and it gives me a place to start and to move forward and say, okay, how can I work on, improving my self-esteem, especially in writing, and how can I, for example, the ideas, saying that my writing doesn't have to be about the fact that my grammar is not the same as my friend's grammar, it's about the content. It's about what are the ideas that we're discussing, because I know that I love having discussions. I love thinking deeply. I love, like this podcast, I love talking about these deep subjects, but then I get around to writing them down and it gets intimidating. And so being able to process that it's because I'm comparing myself to outer sources and outer ideas that don't have the same experiences, then I think that kind of gives me a place to go to say, well, how can I be more independent in this?
Right. Well, and I think like hearing it even if it's something like you've already told yourself, I need to stop thinking that I'm not good enough, right? That's something I feel like a
Right.
lot of people tell themselves.
Everybody.
But when like somebody says that that's how you're thinking, it puts an urgency on like,
Right.
oh wait, I actually like think that about myself,
Yeah.
and
Right.
I actually need to change that, and I
Right.
need
Real.
Yeah.
right, and now it's real, and then now I
Right.
have to like actually change who I am, and it like subconsciously actually starts my change.
Right.
Oh no, it's just
sorry.
it just kind of brings that, like we talked about at the beginning, it brings us that awareness of
Yeah.
then being able to say, oh, okay. And then you can address
Right.
it.
Right.
But before, it's all in our heads. It's just like up here, just running
Yeah.
around. And so just having that awareness then tweaks our actions going forward.
To kind of throw it back to the beginning, what are some of the things that you've experienced in relation to mental models? What are some of the ideas that maybe you've had changed? Or I know that the mentors did this a while ago together, and so what are some of the things that you learned from doing this?
I think in practicing this and being aware of the mental models and how we think about the world, one, it makes people so much more fascinating, right? Like
Right.
now I watch the news and I'm like, hold up. What's really being said here? Like,
Right.
Right.
Well, it's like that situation where it takes Darth Vader from being a villain to someone who's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
I mean,
it's not about,
lost the love of his
right?
life, you know?
Right.
Well, but even then, the conversation isn't about Darth Vader. It's about what we believe about
Right.
Darth Vader, therefore what we believe about life. Right?
Right.
So it,
Oh my
So
God.
like, it just
cool.
goes
Oh,
deeper than Darth Vader. We talk about the Avengers, we talk
Yeah.
about superheroes, we talk about a lot of things. But the conversation is so much more revealing than what we're saying.
Yeah.
right.
How, I guess, two pieces. It reflected back to me how much I judged and judge,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
If all in practicing this, if all I'm doing is reflecting or trying to ask a question or seeking to understand someone, if I'm truly seeking to understand them, there's no room for my judgment.
Right.
That
Right.
can't be there, because then I'm understanding me, I'm not understanding them. Like I have to ask question after question after question to then understand where they're coming from. The idea of to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you know, you've heard that. No, just walk in
Right.
someone
Right.
else's shoes. Well, most of the time when we do that, we're like, well, but if I were in their situation, I would have responded this way. But you are
Mhm.
not them.
Mhm.
So to walk in their shoes means to walk in their shoes with their
Right.
experiences and their thoughts
Whew.
and their ideas. It's not to walk in their shoes carrying yourself around, carrying your mind
Right.
and your experiences around,
Ooh.
because you are a
Ooh.
different person.
Whoa! Hey. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
And so,
Because like I always thought about that, like you're walking in their shoes, but like it's me.
Yeah.
I'm not walking in like but like it's just me doing what they're doing. But no, I have to be
Right.
doing what they're doing as they're doing. I don't know. I
Right.
don't know.
right.
Oh my goodness.
Um,
And you wouldn't have your own experiences that gave you your beliefs if you were walking in their shoes. You would have their experience
Right.
with their beliefs, which is why they do the things that they do.
That's so cool. Okay.
Anyways.
Challenge and
so
Oh yeah.
I mean, that's kind of
Takeaway.
a big piece for me, is making sure that when I am with someone and having a conversation and seeking to understand, I'm really seeking to understand them,
Right.
not understand
Yep.
themselves, understand them through my perspective. And that's hard. And I don't know
Right.
if you can ever truly distance yourself from your perspective. But the more you can try, the better.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the last part,
Okay.
sorry, I know there's one more thing you asked about, like, what have I taken
No
away
worries.
from this?
Yeah, go for
But
it.
the last part is about what are the assumptions that I make? Like in the 4 agreements where it talks about never assume anything.
That's such a good book.
There's times in listening, as I'm listening and I'm hearing these models come out, that I'm recognizing, whoa. You're making an assumption about someone else's beliefs. You can't do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You've got to ask
Right.
the question to bring out their own belief.
Yeah.
Right.
And so
Right.
it's made me much more aware of my assumptions about other people, about how they think, and about what they do. I'm definitely not perfect, but I
Yeah.
have this process to me is just It's fascinating because the more
That's
Right.
the more I'm
cool.
aware,
That's
Right.
the
so
more I'm
cool.
aware, the more I learn and the more I can grow and change. Because
Yeah.
it changes how we learn from other people.
My takeaway would be that I realized through doing that exercise, I have a lot of underlying beliefs that I don't necessarily want and that are hindering my life. And I think that I've had a couple things that I've been wanting to do for a long time and not understanding why they were working. But if I can get rid of those underlying beliefs, then maybe that'll kind of help me out, help me write better.
Yeah. And I think for my takeaway, everybody's kind of dumb. I don't know. That's not the best way to say that, but we're all,
Innocent, ignorant, I don't know.
ignorant. Yes, we don't even think about who we are, what we're going through, how we're affecting other people, how other people are affecting us. We just, like Kelln's things, or like what I wrote down about Kelln, we are just obeying society's rules and we don't understand like that. And so we need to like become self-aware. And I don't mean that in like a hippie way, but like we need to pay attention to ourselves and to really think deeply about who we are and what we care about and where we go in life and like so many things.
Right.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
And then what do you think, what could you challenge our listeners with
Oh,
Yeah.
from this episode?
totally.
Yeah.
I think in this, if you'd asked me at the beginning, it might have been different. But after our conversation, I think some of it, or I guess the challenge would, it's being aware, like you said, Daniel, too, like being aware, self-aware, but
Yeah.
being aware of the assumptions we are making about other people. And then seeking to understand them, where they are coming from without judgment. That if we are truly seeking to understand someone, it cannot be with judgment of, oh, well, that was bad or that was good, or this is how I would do it. They have to be who they are, and we have to let them be who they are and love them.
Oh,
Amen.
Who they
Amen.
are.
Hallelujah.
Amen.
said, preach, sister.
So
All
I
right.
think that would, that'd probably
Unless
be
you
it.
want-
But I feel like I have to go back to it and think about
Perfect.
it.
It's perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. It has been so wonderful to have you on. I know I have learned a lot, and I know Daniel has too. I hope our listeners will as well. And thank you to our listeners for coming on.
And for you listeners, if you could rate us 5 stars on iTunes, that would be very helpful for the algorithm. If you have any further ideas or anything you want us to talk about on this podcast, we have a question and answer on Spotify now. You can email us at podcast@paradigmhigh.org, or you can DM us on Instagram at @theparadigmpod. Thank you guys so much for listening and keep engaging in the great conversation.